A couple million feet, all cash, baby. I eat a little cheese and a rash, baby. I eat a little cheese like snack, baby.
What's going on, YouTube? Back with another video. Today's video is episode 2 of the series Breaking Through Mental Health with Mikaela Brewer. Before we get started with episode 2, I just want to talk about a few things during episode 1 with Darrington Evans. For one, he really pressed about the importance of having a good support system around you. Your support system and the people that you have around you really affects your mental health. If your support system is negative, toxic, and doesn't support you, I guarantee you that your mental health will get affected and you will not feel your best self mentally. And for 2, Darrington was super underrated, but he did not let the outside noise affect him. I feel like a lot of people, especially athletes, care about what others say about them, and they allow the negative comments and the hate get to them and affect their mental health. By caring what other people say about you, it can create anxiety, it can create depression, it can take a toll on you mentally. But Darrington was able to block that outside noise and just focus on what he had to do, focus on his support system, he focused on his dreams, he focused on his goals, and he completely ignored what everybody else was saying. He completely ignored the hate, the comments, the doubters, and really just focused on what he had to do to get to where he needed to be. With that being said, let's get started with episode 2. She is a very successful and decorated high school player. She was 4-time team MVP, 4-time team captain, 4-time Instill Secondary School Athlete of the Year. She was a 4-star recruit and rated 7th among international players according to Prospects Nation. She represented Team Canada at 2 international tournaments where she was team captain at the FIBA Americas U18 Women's Championship in Chile, where they won the silver medal in 2016. And then she committed to Stanford University, where she played all 4 years from 2016 to 2020. She was a 2-time Pac-12 tournament champion, Pac-12 Academic Honor Roll in 2020, and Pac-12 All Academic Honorable Mention in 2019. Honestly, that's not even half of what she's accomplished. I had to sum it up for the sake of this video, but this girl is crazy talented in what she does, not only in what she does athletically, but she's also a mental health advocate. So we have Mikaela Brewer right now. How are you doing?
Doing well, yeah. How are you?
I'm good. So I like to start the interviews off with pretty much the same questions, just so people can get to know you a little better. So the first one is kind of just give us a description of yourself, your upbringing, childhood, why you started playing basketball, what were your dreams growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up like just north of Toronto, so in Barrie. For anyone who doesn't know where that is, I was the oldest of 6 kids, so never a dull moment in our house for sure. Started playing basketball probably around 7 or 8, but I didn't start playing competitively till I was like 11, 12, grade 6, I think. Honestly, growing up before I started playing basketball, I was like very set on being a ballerina. And yeah, super weird. But I still have a lot of respect for dancers. I think they're so cool. So
They are.
that dream is somewhere still in my brain.
It's harder than it looks, I'm sure.
Yeah. I've always loved to learn, and I'm a complete nerd. Ended up at Stanford, which is coined Nerd Nation, so good fit. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I drink way too much coffee, that too.
Nice. So as an athlete and mental health advocate, why do you think there's this stigma on mental health in sports?
Yeah, so I think it's like 3 things primarily. The first is that there's this notion that we can't reach out for help unless we're in crisis, which is just not true at all. I think mental health is something you have to take care of, like you take care of like physical hygiene. It's on a continuum, and we kind of ebb and flow along that continuum. And I think that's just not spoken about enough. The other thing I think for athletes specifically is this toxic definition of what mental toughness is. And it's that we should be able to not only work towards our limits, but like push past them and break like any barrier that's in our way. And I think mental toughness and mental strength is actually recognizing where we are on that continuum that I mentioned. So that's definitely not spoken about enough either. And then this performance pressure, and associating worth and identity with your performance and your statistics. And I think coaches uphold that, maybe not intentionally, but that's definitely a really tough dynamic that exists. And we associate like poor performance with being weak spirited, and we internalize that as I'm not strong enough to beat this mental health concern, mental illness, mental disorder, like I can beat my, heavy squat reps in the weight room, and it's not the same comparison. Yeah.
So, which ties into the next question. As an alumni college athlete, what were your experiences dealing with mental health?
Yeah, so I grew up with some pretty strong OCD tendencies that kind of became exacerbated when I was 18, 19, so just kind of getting into college. And I had some very severe depressive episodes because I was struggling with it my freshman year. And then February of my freshman year, I attempted suicide and ended up in the psych ward on the 5150, which is a hold, 72-hour hold for suicide. And yeah, I spent a lot of time in the hospital through that year, just doing intensive therapy and working through things. Probably the toughest few months of my life. My team went to the Final Four while I was in the hospital. And I think maybe the hardest piece for me was the transition back into playing and being like, okay, I've had these things happen to me. Have they changed how good I am at basketball? Have they changed like my capabilities? And so I kind of had to wrestle with that for the rest of my career. Anytime I didn't play well, anytime that I hardly played in a game, like immediately in my head, it was like, oh, it's because you have major depression. It's because you have OCD. And those were automatic associations I had to fight against a bit. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I totally respect you for going through all that while still being an athlete, while still going to school. I'm sure that's a lot. So looking back, why do you think you went through that? Like, is there a lot of people that are that have depression episodes, anxiety, whatever the case may be, it's a lot from, personal pressure. It could be just your thoughts. So in your case, what do you think was the reason why you went through these mental health disorders?
Yeah, I mean, from doing or being involved in research in some of this stuff, it's a combination of genetic predispositions. That's a hard word to say. Combination of that and your environment. And so I think I definitely had genetic predispositions from my family, but also like the pressure associated with being a elite athlete and an elite student. I think Stanford's a bit unique in that, as are some other Ivy League schools. And that definitely kind of maybe pushed me over the edge a little bit, trying to navigate Stanford and being an athlete with some of the things that I already kind of had going for me. So genetic influences can be activated by your environment very easily. And so I would be willing to bet that definitely had something to do with it.
And I think your story can inspire the people that, like, it's okay, even as an athlete, it's okay to have professional help. I think a lot of athletes, when they tend to need professional help, it's like, oh, I can't handle the pressure of sports. No, like, you're human. It's okay to get professional help outside of your sport. So I think your story in terms of that is super inspiring. Have you always been this open about your mental health? It takes a lot of courage to come up front and admit that you are struggling mentally, especially as an athlete. So were you always this open?
Definitely not. I kind of grew up in a family that wasn't like anti mental health, but like it wasn't something we talked about a lot. And so I definitely pushed things down until I couldn't carry that weight anymore. So I definitely was not always open to talking about it the way that I do now. And I think I was very influenced early on by some of the like comments and things that were made. Like I remember the times when I was in the hospital or going through intensive therapy, I wasn't on the bench in the games on TV. And there were comments made like, oh, she got kicked off the team, got in with the wrong crowd, got into drugs and alcohol. And I mean, if you're making those comments on the internet, you need to get a hobby, but it's, I think in and of itself, that's a problem, because the automatic association is like, oh, she's done something like that's warranted getting kicked off the team, not, gee, I wonder if this person's going through some kind of problem or mental health.
It's like automatically like negative thoughts of, oh, she got kicked off, instead of thinking beyond that.
Yeah. And like that's very troublesome. And it just feeds into that stereotype of like athletes are supposed to be unbreakable. So that association is not made. So I struggled with that a lot. And I think the first time I shared my story was terrifying, but I had really good teammates in my corner who were like, you need to do this and we're going to back you on it. So
good. So, which ties into, again, the next question. A lot of athletes still remain quiet to this day about their mental health disorder and mental health struggles. So for those who are watching right now, or what would you recommend to them, to the ones that are quiet and just, they don't know how to approach the situation? What would you recommend to those athletes?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think the first step has to be like getting your story out of like the confines of your mind and how you're interpreting it. And I think the best place to do that is with a teammate who you trust, and who will listen to you. And they may not understand, they may not even know where professional resources or anything are, but you can just sit down with them and be like, let's take off our athlete hat for a second and just be humans and have a conversation. And I need to literally take this out of my brain and put it somewhere else and put it out there. And then kind of once you've done that and regurgitated what's going on, then you might be in a position to be like, okay, it's out of my brain. Maybe I can now take this to a professional and then look into what resources are available at your school, or in general. There's so much out there now, and people that are willing to help. But yeah, I'd say start there with a teammate or someone you trust.
Right. So if you want to talk about it, what was your experience when you came out to your coaches about your mental health struggles?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely went to my teammates first. And my coaches didn't know a whole lot when I kind of had that crisis moment. I was kind of forced to talk to them once I was in the hospital. And so that was a very difficult conversation, like, because of course in my head, I'm thinking this is going to jeopardize my whole basketball career. They're not going to see me the same way. I'm not going to be treated the same way. So that was really hard. But it was a conversation that I had to have. And it didn't do all the things that I thought it was going to do. And it didn't impact me in that way. I didn't totally can my basketball career. And so it broke down some barriers that I was thinking about for sure.
I'm sure it released a lot of pressure too, having to just expose all that, and now it's like a whole lot of weight just was lifted off your shoulders, which I'm sure affected your future, like not even your future, but just the next day after that, and just everything just probably seemed or felt a lot easier, I'm sure. You've been working on your first novel, The Sifting Project, soon to be released, I think. I don't know if it's been released yet, but you've been working on that. You've been writing poems, blogs, you've done research on mental health and neuroscience. Your work has been published on the Stanford Daily, Unsinkable, Magnifying Wellness. So you're really out there really promoting mental health. So with that being said, specifically about this novel, it seems like it means a lot to you. So what's the story and purpose behind this book?
Honestly, it started with me thinking a lot about memory. which is something that I really struggle with related to depression. Memory loss is a common symptom. And so I was thinking about that. I was thinking about how do memories like manifest? How do they serve us? And so the story definitely came from there. And I was also thinking about people having stories related to what they remember and their experiences, and having that be the truth of their experience. And I was like, how do I create a story where I'm exposing that and saying that there are stories throughout human history that have been silenced? And how do I kind of, push that message without either telling it for them or taking up space? And so that's kind of what the goal of the book is. And it's kind of like a swirl of neuroscience and poetry and the boundary between them, and kind of what kinds of things are in our memories and our experiences and how we perceive them, and that nobody should be able to take that away from us. So it kind of has these like two scientists who go on this discovery of like what memories do, how they're passed on between people, generationally, and otherwise. And that research kind of falls into the wrong hands, and they have to figure out what to do about that, and whose hands the research should be in. So
that's creative. So within that novel, is there like actual scientific facts about mental health, or is it just like kind of like a novel?
It's fiction. I mean, it's like science fiction ish alternative history kind of a thing. But there definitely is neuroscience. I drew on real neuroscience to kind of create like what a biological picture of or experience of a memory would look like physically. So yeah, it was a bit of an experimentation, but I hope people like it.
I'm sure they will. It's definitely different, especially coming from an alumni college athlete from a top basketball program. I'm sure it'll make a lot of noise. So I'm definitely looking forward to that date when it does release. What are your biggest takeaways battling against mental health disorders?
Yeah, biggest takeaways. I would say awareness of knowing like when I need to distract myself versus when I need to sit with some of the things that are in my head. I think there's this like self-care movement that's a good and bad thing, because we can't always distract ourselves by, doing all these quote like self-care things. I think there's a place where we need to realize like I need to sit with what's going through my mind right now. And so I learned that for sure, like awareness of the difference of those two things. And then I'd also say knowing how things get easier, because something like a mental illness is not necessarily gonna like dissipate. It's not gonna go away. It's gonna maybe get better sometimes and resurface other times. And I think understanding that has been really helpful. And I like to use the like super hard conditioning test analogy. Like the first time you run it, you're like, oh my God, what the hell? This is the most terrible thing ever.
Yeah.
And then the second and third time you run it, and many more maybe, it doesn't hurt any less. Like you still feel the lactic acid like kicking up everywhere, but you know what to expect, and you know how you're going to feel on like rep 4, and you know how you're going to feel at the end. And so yeah, like knowing how things get better in that way, versus like expecting it to go away, because it doesn't. So I definitely learned those two, I'd say.
I think a lot of athletes, they tend to push things away to the side and, I'll take care of that later, or it's just not the right time, or it'll go away, and it's not going to go away. It's going to come back. It's like a sickness. It just gets worse and worse and worse. So awareness, definitely dealing with it is probably the best way to go. What are your goals within the next 5 years from now? Because I know you have a lot going for yourself. You have a lot of projects going on. So where do you see yourself within 5 years in terms of the topic of mental health?
Yeah. Of course, I want to keep growing myself and working on my own mental health, because I can't help others until I help myself. want to keep writing, speaking as much as I can. Very close to publishing some research papers related to athletes. Can't disclose what they're about, but very excited about that, and I hope to keep doing that. Then I guess like just to plug some of the organizations that I'm involved with because they're incredible. The dinner party is amazing. I just joined with them. Definitely check them out. Unsinkable, Magnify Wellness, Reach Out Response Network, if you're in the Toronto area, is creating a mental health specific crisis response team, so that when we make phone calls about mental health crises that we see, it doesn't get filtered through the police, which is a really big move, I think. So definitely check them out. And then Time Out is an app that I just started working with. It's incredible. It's kind of centralizing the athlete like mental health care experience and any moving piece that's involved in that. And it puts the mental health journey like in the hands of the athlete. So super excited about that. But yeah, lots coming up. I would say redefine failure and how you interpret what failure is. I don't think it exists. I think it's just a step in that kind of like growth. And as that, then that can be helpful versus saying, oh, I've failed. And I think athletes tend to associate a lot with failure. So yeah, redefine what you think of as failure, or if you even use the word at all. And then I'd also say that healing is not linear. In no way is it linear. And I also think there's a stereotype with like, oh, somebody who's gotten to the other side of the bridge. And then once you've quote like healed, and this is I think the case for a lot of mental health advocates, they've been through a really hard experience and they're speaking about it, but that doesn't mean that they've fully like healed from everything. So I think we have to do a better job of making that association. So knowing that healing is not a destination, it's a process, and it's a lifelong process. And then I guess the last thing would be like, your value is not based on your performance, either athletically, academically, or your ability to like conquer a mental illness or mental health disorder, because you don't conquer it, you learn to live with it and understand it and see it. And sometimes to do that, you have to take a step away, and that's 100% okay.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of people will enjoy this interview and probably rewatch it to really grasp what you're saying and understand, because I mean, you spill a lot of wisdom, truth, especially being an alumni college athlete. So I really, really appreciate your time and your words of wisdom.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And that concludes episode 2 with Mikaela Brewer. This will definitely be one of my favorite episodes because she is a college alumni athlete. So I know that a lot of athletes can relate to what she had to say in her story. And of course, she's from Canada, so I'm definitely biased in there, but I gotta stick up for my Canadians. We got so many more interviews coming up, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date, and I will see you underdogs later.
I'm breaking chains, yeah. Tummy feeling bubbly off the rose. Friends turn to foes, haters tell them go away. Rappers making shiggy dance like a soul train.